Welcome to Monarchist Minute Royalist news and discussion out of the good old US of A. I am Charles York, wishing you all a happy month of the Sacred Heart. Last month was the month of Mary, and next month is the month of the Precious Blood, if I'm not mistaken. I probably should have double checked that before starting, but
I'll send you for it.
okay. Well, so joining me tonight is my voice twin, Trad. You just heard him. Then we have Krieger, everyone's favorite guest, who is from south of the border. Then we have Bubba.
Hey,
What
Krieger's not from Mexico. He's
I report.
American.
he is?
No,
Well, that's how
he's
out
a-
of touch I
he's a
am.
Mexican, so it's fine.
Okay. Well, his
Plus,
lineage, at any rate.
Close
Okay.
enough.
yes.
Close enough.
Okay.
Okay,
So
I thought he was. I thought he did live in Mexico proper.
It took 3 seconds and we're off topic.
okay. Well, back to our
But you
list
see, the lore
of
is important. The lore is important.
Okay. Back to our list of introductions. You've already heard Will, who's just as equally confused as I am, and Victor, who apparently knows more than I do. Our main topic for tonight is we're going to be trying to be dangerous intellectuals again. How much power should each of the levels of nobility have in relation to each other? You know, how much autonomy should the dukes have versus, or how centralized authority should be in the hands of the monarch? And obviously, we're not going to forget our boy, the emperor, because in any proper society, the emperor is around. Let's see, discord is fleeting, but the glory of Rome is forever.
The
So,
Emperor protects.
what did you say?
The emperor protects.
Oh,
It's
yes.
a 40K reference.
Yes. So, who would like to jump off the landing craft and storm the beach? Oh, by the way, D-Day is happening. We should probably talk about that later. And storm the beaches of this topic I thought of in my dream, no lie.
So
Well, basically.
I would like to jump off once more into the breach. I think that the principle of subsidiarity applies here within this context where local problems, if they can be, should be solved locally. So the I'm just gonna riff here. The Duke of, let's just say, New England should have the capability to deal with a really bad snowstorm in Boston. The Duke of New England should not necessarily have the authority to be first to deal with a another like natural disaster that passes through other parts of the country before it gets there. Of course, he should help them if they call upon him, but he should be able to exercise his authority in his region unless it contradicts the law, the imperial law or the national law. Then in this case, Duke of New England should be able to deal with New England unencumbered by anyone else who wants to meddle in New England coming from the outside.
I think that's a pretty good setup. If I had kind of, say, free reign to set up a structure myself in kind of how they would interact, my
I'll
opinion
be right
is
back.
my opinion is that there should be a strict hierarchical structure when it comes to the interactions. Very, similar to what we have in the U.S., but to a certain degree. So obviously, the monarch should have total sovereignty and authority wherever is in his kind of, kingdom or empire, depending on what we call it. But that's not important. Basically, he should have total sovereignty to do what he wishes, and within reasonable understanding. I'll elaborate about that later. But I think that it should make sense that, kind of like what Victor was saying, the scale of, because the only thing when it comes to ruling, and in part to judiciary, is that it only becomes important. Like, if we had everything that just worked like that, we wouldn't have a government. People would just do things, but people don't. So, I think that the scale of whatever issue comes about, be it criminal, civil, whatever, should be dealt with on that level. So if there's, say, a local issue within a town, then let whatever magistrate is in charge of that town deal with it. If there's something bigger, like on a city level, let a baron deal with it, right? State, duke, or whatever have you. But I think it should be based on how big whatever you're dealing with is in area, right? So it should never be up to, say, an imperial, like, it should never be up to the monarch of the US to have to deal with small local cases outside of, say, his, like, so to cue the example of the Byzantine Empire, when Justinian had issues in Constantinople, he would address those issues because while he was the emperor of all of the Eastern Roman Empire, he also was directly in charge of Constantinople and that surrounding area, so he dealt with those issues. So it really should be based on whatever magistrate or legal authority is within the closest and size kind of. It's weird to try and phrase it, but I'm no legal expert. But basically, I think it should just be, top down overrides all, but letting people deal with issues on a small scale, because one man can't alone rule the entire United States. That's my opinion on it, at least.
I sort of agree with everyone. I admit I don't have a super complicated opinion on the subject other than federalism works and delegation of powers to lower levels is definitely a good idea. Otherwise, you end up with a bloated, over-encumbered system that can't really accomplish anything at all.
Though I will always personally argue for a centralized bureaucracy, because breaking it down too much and we just become dinosaurs.
Now, I believe the way the U.S. is right now, with federal, state, county, and most states, city after that, one applicable, works pretty well. Personally, I would separate the U.S. into different regions and have like an elective monarchy as one idea I have. Elective monarchy, like I think it's either Malaysia or Indonesia. One of those two have it that way.
With
And
kind of like the sub-kings, is that what you're talking about?
yeah. Or like how Switzerland does, where they switch between their president. But to go based off what you said, Trad, about the head, the head of the empire, I think what you're trying to say is like if there's like a baron that is directly underneath the king, doesn't have anyone between, doesn't have a duke between him and the emperor king, then that's one issue the emperor can deal with, like federal land that we have now. Is that what you meant?
Well, no, my point when I was kind of describing it is that all governance really comes down to issues that have to be dealt with on a certain level, right? Like, the reason we govern ourselves is because not every person is going to agree on everything, and therefore we have to have someone to mediate, right? And that started originally in history as a judicial system, which eventually became a full government to make decisions on this. And really, it just comes down to the level of, so, like, bringing up examples again, like if you have a small issue in a town regarding, say, someone, like, let's say there's a company that's poisoning a very specific stream, right? They're dumping a bunch of garbage into it. There's no need to get, like, say, a state official involved with that. I mean, not a state official, a state nobility is what I mean. There's no need to get someone on that big of a level who controls that much into it. What would make more sense is to just have someone more locally to deal with it. But if there's a bigger issue, like say companies are shipping their labor out to other nations, or there's a big kind of, say, political movement that's causing disruptions, like something that's more affecting of these larger, more important noble titles of their attention, then they should be dealing with it. It's pretty standard practice, like when you're studying I really like the system of, say, again, the Byzantine Empire. They had what was you had the emperor, of course, and most people don't really think of nobility in the Byzantine Empire, but there was a state title that eventually became a medieval title, being the dukes, which became duke. But the dukes was someone who, usually hereditarily, from someone who had earned the title, would be in charge of a certain area and would deal with the issues of those areas. And unless they became a problem for the empire, he wouldn't really tell the emperor about it. If it was just a minor thing, he'd deal with it. But if it became big enough, like, oh, I don't know, when the dukes of the Far East started having issues with Parthians, or Persians, I guess, at this time, starting to invade, he sent word to the emperor, and the emperor sent Belisarius to crush the invasion. So it makes more sense to, as an issue gets bigger or is big, to involve higher officials, but a lower, less prioritized issue should just be with the lower people, right? The dukes or the barons or the what have you.
Now, I will say there needs to be some kind of oversight from higher up, because when we start getting into smaller local governments, take it for someone who's from a small Midwest town, it's easier for corruption to go overlooked in small communities.
Well, and that's kind
And
of why
that's where
that's
royal enforcers come in.
that's kind of why I brought up the example of the dukes, because they would have assigned to them advisors from the emperor, people who would basically go forth with the emperor's will and tell the dukes of whatever region what what the emperor wanted, right? Be it to that specific region or in general. And this person could entirely go around the back of the dukes if he thought he was acting against the emperor's will. In fact, the second highest position in Constantinople, behind the emperor, was the guy who was in charge of the people he was sending out to advise the dukes. So it would it absolutely makes sense to have. That's why I earlier made the separation between state and local, because having state officials on the lower level to assist and to, in some cases, override local officials will help balance that out while still keeping a general spread of power.
Right, because
Because if you spread
when you
far, I mean, inherently monarchism is against the idea of spreading power out too much.
right, because when you made the comment about polluting a very specific stream, the first thing that popped into my head, there's no way that company did not pay off that local noble.
Which is why it's a good idea to have state advisors.
Yeah, which is sort of why, in like, I'll give an example here. Uh, if workers in Boston decide to strike and not do anything, and the Duke of New England can't deal with the issue, then he has to call the emperor. He just doesn't have a choice.
Yeah. I mean, and
Mhm.
a great example in American history of sometime basically the power being too spread out and not having any centralized authority to deal with it was the Whiskey Rebellion. That was back during the days of the Articles of Confederation. And it
Um,
was one of the things that brought down the Articles, was because Massachusetts, I believe, it was either Massachusetts or Maryland, but was
Uh,
unable, I think it was
I
Massachusetts.
It was,
know
yeah, I think it was
it was
Massachusetts.
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, right?
Was
Yeah,
it
It was
Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania.
I don't remember that. I don't
No,
remember it
Massachusetts
too
was
well.
Shea. I think
All I
it
know is
was
he
in the
was
middle
the
colonies.
closest George Washington ever came to becoming our king, and we were this close to
We
glory.
were that close. We just needed to like kill Aaron Burr early so Hamilton could try and get him to be king. Like that's
Oh,
all we needed to do. I'm kidding, of course, but um y-
Unless.
unless but no, to continue my point, that when you don't have a centralized power to deal with the local authorities and to because basically if you think of it like a building, right? You can stack a building really tall or you can make a building really wide, but if you don't have supports, inner supports to the facade of the building, it will collapse. So having those inner supports, or like a bureaucracy, a centralized bureaucracy, will allow you to keep it tight and keep it from falling apart, which is, in my opinion, more important of a topic. I think the discussion of spreading of power and all that, it it, it is made null and void if you can't have a bureaucracy to help with that. I'm generally against bureaucracies if they're democratic, but selected bureaucracies, say ones like where a king will pick his advisors and his people to go do such and such, can be very effective because by definition the king's good people by his side, so it's a very meritocratic system.
I think Imperial China had a very, very interesting system when it comes to creating a bureaucracy.
oh,
Sorry, say that
And
again.
like they had the
My headphone.
and now, of course I'm not an expert on this, but they had the exams. And I think one of the interesting things about the imperial bureaucracy is that upon becoming part of bureaucrat, you had to forfeit any inheritance you had, and I'm not sure if this is consistent on all dynasties, but especially some of the earlier ones had well, they had the bureaucrats fixed.
Well, yeah, and it can cause a lot of issues with, you know,
I know,
old
but it's
like
like it was their idea to prevent hereditary interest from forming in the bureaucracy.
yeah. And I mean inherent like just on a general level, if you don't have a centralized bureaucracy to help with a hereditary, because we can all agree hereditary stuff is good, but however, if you have a hereditary office that is not backed up by a meritocratic what is it? Bureaucracy, centralized bureaucracy, then you're just going to have a bunch of old dinosaurs living in their castles trying to rule but not actually being able to do anything because they're old and not paying attention and not caring. So it's important to have a centralized bureaucracy to help them. Like I said, no rules alone.
right. And speaking of no man ruling alone, today, as we're recording this, Italy commemorates the fall of their monarchy. I believe they call it. Uh,
Let me get a poll up because I made a post for it on our Twitter.
Isn't
Now,
it like
if
Day of the
we have
Republic or something?
any Italian followers,
Festa
let
della
me know.
Repubblica.
Yeah,
Festa
okay,
della Repubblica.
yeah,
Thank
like
you, because my Italian is horrific.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
Sorry, go ahead, Chuck.
it's just the Italian Republic. People, okay, if you don't like the House of Savoy, that's fine. I completely get it. I don't like the House of Savoy either. But you can't say that the Italian Republic in any way, shape, or form is better. I'm just
Do
saying.
they,
We're not saying that.
I know,
I'm
but
not
someone
saying
would.
that.
Okay.
do
And
they,
like,
have they still yet to form a stable government? Because last I checked, the Italian public is still like in perpetual limbo.
yeah, well, apparently they've had, according to my theology teacher, well, ninth grade theology teacher, 11th grade AP Euro teacher, 12th grade principal, who was also deacon, when he was in Italy, or he said that the Italian government there's been more Italian governments than Christmases since World War II. Just imagine that. Like, apparently when he got to Italy, there was a bunch of communist signs being posted, and he said, I'm an American. Should I worry about this? And some Italians said, oh no, dude, the government's gonna fall in a couple of months. lo and behold,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well,
Yeah.
Italy has a
Italian
really bad
politics
habit
is
of.
just it's a silly little
And
thing.
I'm gonna
and
make my hot take of the podcast. Italy shouldn't be united.
yes, that's not a hot take. That is just
That's
objective reality.
I mean, I
real.
wouldn't say it shouldn't be united, but they should have picked a more decentralized.
Listen,
There's
okay,
only
You
it's
know,
one
the
either Italian
Italian,
unification via German Empire style, or
no, no, no,
Italy is
like there
united.
should be an
no, no,
Italian
no, no.
confederacy, if you will.
Here is my opinion on it. You can either have no unification in Italy and have like the medieval or even Renaissance states of Italy, right? You can
I'll
have
even be
that,
fine with like right
or
before the
or
unification.
or you can have unified Italy under Roma. That's it. Those are the only choices.
We are
Roma or nada.
not sitting here choosing between a disunified Italy and just a papist one.
I never
This
said a
unified
papist one.
Italy is best.
I said Roma, as in
He
Rome,
said Rome.
as
Yeah,
in the
Rome.
Roman Empire.
Okay, and technically that's what the Italians were trying to do. It just didn't pan out.
Now,
Yeah.
however,
Do have a
so
successor to
I
the Roman
didn't
Empire.
I didn't inherently say it would be a papist one. I mean, I meant it, but you kind of predicted me there. I'll give you that much. But I think
I know
Italy
you well
unified
enough
only
to
works.
know.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
Italy only works unified if if it is the command of its own unification and it is the empire. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Same thing with
Another hot
Greece.
take. Another hot take.
Well, what
Napoleon should
about
have stayed on
Greece?
Elba, and Elba should have remained independent from Tuscany.
No.
Wait, what did you say? You were like kind of muffled.
Yes, say it
He
again.
said that he
Yes.
said that he thought Napoleon should have stayed on the island of Elba, and Elba should be independent of Tuscany, which is complete.
100%, 100%
I
Like,
disagree. I
hundred
think
like
that
percent.
is a bad take.
I'm not exactly a fan of what Napoleon did in Italy when he was there. Something like going from France, Italy, Helvetic Republic, Roman Republic, that, like founding all these little French Revolution mini states.
And then
Not my.
and then when he became emperor, he founded the kingdom of Napoleonic Kingdom of Italy. He put Moran and like the Sicilies.
Los
like
Masones.
honestly, I just have to think about how funny it would be if there's just like a little, if like the island of Elba became a sort of like Taiwan for France, where there's an exclave of the French Empire, but the French Republic is active on the mainland.
I
Um,
Like that would
here's
just be funny to me in a sort of cosmic sort of way.
it'd be
sending
funny, but
Napoleon to
realistically,
Elba.
Anyway,
anyways,
hold
during
on,
the
hold on.
No,
silly
I
little
here's the
event
thing
known
though.
as the
Sending
Risorgimento,
Napoleon
Elba would have been conquered.
sending Napoleon to Elba is the cruelest thing the coalition could have done to that poor unfortunate island. Like, what did it do to deserve that? Like, is there any? I mean, that's like dropping the A bomb on Hiroshima. I mean,
there is something better we could do. I say that we pull a China Taiwan thing where we drop the current I think it's like the fifth French Republic. We drop
Yeah.
them on Elba, and then everything else that France owns becomes whatever restored French monarchy under the Bourbons. Clearly.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
No,
And then
respectfully disagree because
we could have little proxy wars over Elba, just like China does for Taiwan. It'd be great, dude.
Imagine if we can like somehow trick the entire French government into visiting Elba as kind of like a Napoleonic
Well, look,
historical
here's
thing,
the
and then
thing.
we just
Here's the
leave them there. We just ditch
since
them on the island.
since the 1790s, France has had a bad habit of catching on fire whenever the people are angry at the government. Specifically Paris. And I mean, didn't it like last month they basically set half of Paris on fire because they were going to raise the retirement age or something?
Yeah,
And
they
then
yeah,
raised the,
and
they
then in
raised the retirement
response
age, and
Macron
everyone
yeah,
revolted.
and then in response Macron like basically pulled some article from the middle of nowhere that basically said, "Yeah, I have total control over the government now. You can't stop me." Yada yada. Like Yeah, they criticize us for having authority, those Republicans, but then the second they don't get their way in party politics, it's, oh, I'm in charge. I'm an autocrat now,
And
but
for
I'm
like
still democratically elected.
the French are revolting once again.
Oh yes,
You
no,
know,
that's France's no.
There's another option.
Oh,
An island that is owned by France, the
We
island
love
of
Corsica.
Send
yeah.
them back to Corsica.
Well, man, I don't know, man. Corsica's
I
a
don't know.
cool little place.
I'd
Okay,
rather
so
make Corsica its own
Also,
thing and out of
the
punishment for Napoleon.
just a
okay,
reminder
so
that
time for the real hot debate. Is Corsica French or Italian?
Italian, no doubt.
It's neither. It's
Italian.
Corsican.
It,
Like,
Well, yeah.
okay, Corsican is
Corsican-
such a weird little language. It's Italian.
If you
and
want-
it sounds kind of French.
If you want the
I
real
don't think
schizo
anyone
take,
wants it.
if you want a real schizo take regarding who owns what in the Mediterranean, the Vandals should own Sardinia.
No, here's the real. Here's the real
Unfortunately, there are no more
thing
Vandals.
anymore. There hasn't been
in
a
the Mediterranean. In the
nation.
Mediterranean, everything belongs to Spain.
Yes, verdadera.
No,
Cease
everything belongs to
using
me.
Spaniards.
I'm not even a Spaniard.
We Spaniards are good at nothing if not taking every little thing we can find and planting a little flag on it with a red cross. Like,
Exactly.
So
That
are the
sounds like
British. The only
England.
difference is that the British understand basic economics, so their empire doesn't collapse into hyperinflation.
yes, the British Empire.
I'm
The
just
stunning
saying,
example
New Spain was like twice as rich as Europe. I'm just saying.
and well,
And look where they are now.
that was the fault of the
Well,
United
yes,
States
that's the
government.
fault
Don't
of the
even
United
pretend it wasn't.
States.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
Now,
don't
I will
even
not
pretend.
get into that
Come
rabbit hole.
on, it was not the fault of the U.S. When we took the
Yes, it
Philippines,
was.
we kicked over an already doomed bucket.
No. He's referring to why Mexico and New Spain is in such a condition. That was the fault of the United States government entirely.
Get
And
And I
good.
will not
back
hear
on topic.
otherwise. I will not
Get
hear otherwise.
good.
Anyway,
All right.
what is-
So
I think we wrapped that topic.
yeah. So coming up next week, is there anything? Are there any important holidays coming up in the next week, gentlemen?
There's
D-Day.
probably is one for D-Day.
Dun
6th
dun.
of
Ah.
June, 1944.
1944.
All right. So
D-Day
June
actually has
6th.
special significance for me.
¿Por qué?
Wow, I'm curious if anyone on this podcast actually knows why it has special significance for me. Let's see if
Okay.
anyone knows me well enough.
I'll take a shot. You had a grandparent that fought at Normandy.
Nope.
Uncle.
It's your
I'm
birthday.
23. I just
Wait.
said I turned 23 that day. It's my birthday.
Oh, que bien.
Old.
We're the same age, William.
The joke of my family is I care more about D-Day than my own birthday anyway.
I mean, it did give rise to like one of the longest movies of all time. Actually, how does The Longest Day rank in terms of like normal movies?
Let me look up the
think
longest
I've
movie now because I'm actually interested.
It's one of the movies of all time.
Anyway, let us actually talk about D-Day. But first, happy birthday to
Don't
you.
understand.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear
clapping?
William. Happy birthday
Girl,
to
stop
you.
clapping right now.
And
many
many
more.
more.
Let's talk about D-Day now for a minute. It was a masterstroke plan.
I mean, I'm just saying D-Day only worked because the Germans were too busy doing meth. Like the sheer out, I
Honestly,
refuse to believe that the Germans were not constantly smoking meth because there is no way a bunch of inflatables like made them believe they were going to land at Calais. There's no way.
I mean,
Well, with
film
everything being
film
black
Honestly,
and
was
if
white, it was
film was
hard to
No, no,
pretty
no, no,
tell.
grainy
no.
back then.
Take it for someone who lives in a certified white trash wonderland. If they were smoking meth, we would have been chased off that beachhead.
Well, that Charles, and everything was black and white, so it was harder to tell.
Yeah, I mean, look,
Real, everything was black and white back then.
I mean, it was a master stroke of intelligence and whatnot, but
And German lack of intelligence.
no, I mean, really, you kind of had to. Okay, really though, if you were gonna do an invasion of the English Channel, of course you're gonna go to Dunkirk or not Calais. I mean, it's the sane, sensible place to land. I mean, it's right there. But no, we had to we had to outthink the Germans and land at a less obvious locale. I mean, it's really
if
not
you
fair
really,
sport.
if you really think about it, though, the English attacking Normandy is just revenge from
For real.
1066 of Normandy attacking England.
Yeah.
You
Well, they couldn't
know,
exactly phrase it that way, or else the French wouldn't be too happy about it.
I know, I know.
I
I mean, what
really
was De Gaulle
wonder.
gonna do? Leave Africa?
I really wonder if the Allies were also keeping track of Rommel's movements, because of course Rommel wasn't there the day it happened because he was back in Germany celebrating his wife's birthday. So I'm
I
generally curious if the Allies specifically waited for
It
the day they
was
knew Rommel
No, it was
wasn't
bad
no,
there.
weather.
it was a coinkydink
Yeah.
because they were meant to go on, I think, the 4th.
Oh yeah, that is
It
true.
was a coincidence that Rommel just happened to be. Honestly, if the weather had been good, D-Day might have failed.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I'm pretty sure. I mean, like, how did I mean? Because Rommel's wife survived the war, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure she did.
I
It's like
believe so.
imagine that as like a perpetual reminder of your of your husband, your birthday. Yeah, Rommel kind of. See, this is the interesting thing with Rommel because there's a lot about um Rommel specifically that's ingrained in legend, essentially. Um, like, was he really the cool dude we all
Like
think he
there
was
is a difference
legitimately?
between Rommel and the Desert Fox
Yeah.
Hmm.
because the
Um,
Desert Fox was Allied propaganda so that they would not have another Hitler rise up in like 10, 20 years because they, learned a thing or two after, the first two world wars.
You know how
I'm,
Rommel is? He really just got lucky because he made a gamble during the invasion of France and it just happened to pay off.
mm,
I mean,
I I disagree.
it's
I
it's been a while since I read into, like
I
the
mean,
Ghost
he did
Division and stuff.
accidentally, and I mean literally accidentally, as in he didn't realize that he did it until after the fact, break through the Maginot line and just kept going.
yeah. Well, I
well,
mean,
they'd gone through Belgium, and that was the unexpected part. The other issue is that the attack into Paris was just the exemplar of the kind of it was the apex of German and before that Prussian military planning. Because back during the Franco-Prussian War, there had been this developed tactic idea of quick
I,
warfare.
I,
Basically,
I
uh,
know, I
I,
know
I
the.
know I know you know what Blitzkrieg is, but I'm saying that it was part of a tradition that well, it gives us insight into why Germany lost World War One because they hadn't considered like all of the advancements made in Prussian and then German arms and their tactics had been for a planned, quick, mobile attack. And that's what they did during the Franco-Prussian War, was they just started gobbling up parts of France and taking on French armies, and that's what led them to victory in the Franco-Prussian War, and that's why they lost the First World War, was because they decided to entrench, which was not what they wanted to do. They had light rifles and light armor. What they needed to do was just keep moving. That's why they failed in World
I
War One. That's why they succeeded at first in World War Two.
I know the invasion of France really was the success of. I can't remember like Obstrafit tactic. I can't remember the exact German word, but like the decentralization in German command, which was revolutionary on the European continent for the time.
It was that, and it was trains, which were led by Helmut von Moltke, who was not the one that lost in World War One, but the
The
Franco-Prussian.
elder, the
Isn't
one
it
that was
Yeah.
competent.
Malta?
Yeah,
Isn't it pronounced
Moltke.
Malta?
Moltka, which
Moltke,
sounds a little bit
Moltke.
too much like Malta.
Anyway, Moltke was, or Moltke, whatever, how you want to say it. He was revolutionary for Prussian arms, and like the whole thing for the Prussians and then Germans was light infantry, heavy artillery. That's how they won their wars. And so when they gave that up in World War One, they failed. Hitler realized that, tried to capitalize on half of it with the quick attack. Here's the thing: the wars that Prussia had been fighting were for reunification, right? They knew that if they could quickly attack and disperse an enemy army from an area in Germany, then they could convince those people to live under them, because we're all Germans, right? That's what Germany had been planning. That's how they won Schleswig-Holstein in the Danish War. They pommeled them with artillery and then just sent in light infantry really quick. That's how they took those duchies. But the reason that they couldn't continue to do that, like in World War One, it wouldn't have worked because they entrenched. But in World War II, the reason it didn't work is because the plans and these tactics had been developed in the idea that you would immediately place down roots wherever you invade, and you'd be invading a German people, and thus the German people would be easier accepting to you. That's not what happened in the Second World War. They were invading nations that had very little on the border and none in the inner areas of these nations, like France, or like Czechoslovakia had Germans, but not into the Slovakia bit. So the whole plan was a failure from the
And there
start.
were Germans in Western Poland.
Yeah, but pushing on past that was not going to work with their tactics. It was failed from the start, and the kind of, in my opinion, just final nail in the coffin for Hitler's attempt to take over Europe was his idiotic choice to invade Russia when he was already struggling in the West. Like he had a fair-ish fight in the West. That does not mean you invade Russia.
Well, no,
No,
you see,
because
this
like
is
the
the
whole
problem, though.
reason
He
like they
was
invaded
so
Russia
confident
was
that
because
he
they
could
needed
blitz.
Gentlemen, you're talking over each other.
No, this is the thing, though. His whole goal was the East. Like he really, if France, I mean maybe he would have tried to bump off the French, regain Alsace-Lorraine someday. But if Hitler had his way, he didn't want to fight a war against the British because he knew he and the French, because he was interested in the land in the East. His whole
I'm not
goal
denying
was the
that.
East. So
What I'm
I mean,
saying is he should have pursued that instead of war with the French and the British, because that drew in the Americans and every other person on the planet
no.
well,
against
what
him.
was
So
he
what?
supposed to do? I mean,
Basically
he
just
kind of had to get to
fortified
Poland before.
his western border and then just ignored it after invading
Here-
No,
Poland.
Here's the
because
thing:
that's
it's possible that they would have continued appeasing him, and it's very likely that for a while they'd have continued appeasing Hitler if he hadn't invaded France and Belgium by proxy. If he
no,
hadn't,
because
if he
they
hadn't done
stomped their foot down on Poland.
that, well, no, I know he went down on Poland, but France did not get as involved, and they put up the Maginot Line and they were defending their border, but they weren't going to invade Germany. They were going to protect their own nation.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
this is
wasn't there like an offensive in the Saar? It's just
Now,
because the French command did not want to push out of France.
the
No,
other
they didn't.
problem, the other problem with the German military in World War II is that the way they set up their officer corps and the way promotions were given out kind of incentivized very, very narcissistic personalities. And so eventually you had a system where all the officers were basically kleptomaniacs that were just basically glory hunting later into the war. Just because
Well,
they wanted to look good for Hitler and not actually accomplish anything.
no. I mean, every high-ranking general wants to look good for the propaganda cameras. I mean, for crying out loud, half of the mythos around. Look, don't get me wrong. I love Patton, but you gotta admit he knew how to be a public figure. Like
Oh, entirely.
he had charisma and tactical genius.
I'm not gonna say Patton wasn't a showboat. I'm just saying that in Germany, especially toward the later parts of the war, it was very bad.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
he kind of
well,
had
Most
to appease
and
the Hitler man to stay alive. I'm
I,
just
I mean,
saying.
here's the
yeah,
thing. I think this discussion right now is us saying Hitler is stupid in 7 different languages, which I don't think anyone agrees or disagrees with. Whoops. Yeah, no, none of us disagree that Hitler was dumb. That's the main reason he lost the war. He was an idiot. But I think it is still important to kind of go into the little bitties about what could have gone better. Not as a support of him, but just like in the interest of history, because what's the same thing every single person who ever studied history ever has said when you ask them why they study history? It's to prevent the mistakes of the past, or right, so history doesn't repeat itself. And I think that while maybe cliched, it still holds true.
Well, I mean, I will offer a little bit of pushback on the Hitler was just an idiot, because I'm not going to say that he was the best tactical mind in the world, but a lot of what we think of as his mistakes, um,
Were the mistakes of his generals.
Well, I
yeah,
won't disagree with
but
that.
but a lot of
disagree
his
with that, but I
generals
will.
outlived him, so.
I won't disagree with that. However, I would also like to honestly saying Hitler was an idiot, like he was to an extent, but I think it was more just his narcissism,
like,
his total narcissism and paranoia. If he hadn't been such a paranoid freak, he wouldn't have lost.
I mean, if World War II was
He wasn't
a
going to win because Germany didn't have the resources or industrial power to fight basically the entire planet.
well,
Hmm.
yes, no, but if so, if Hitler was serious, right? If what he was actually advocating for was a pan-European crusade against Bolshevism, right? If that was what he sold on the tin, because he got a lot of French people, he got a lot of people from all over Western Europe and even Eastern Europe. A lot, especially the Ukrainians, who saw the Germans as their liberators for a hot minute. Well, all of Eastern Europe saw the
Until they
Germans as their liberators.
started,
Yeah,
filling the mass grave.
until the Germans decided to do the funding like the Soviets were. Then Hitler would have won the war, but it would have been a different war. It would have been a war where Britain and the U.S. were probably not involved. The U.S. specifically, because let's face it, Roosevelt was kind of buddy buddy with a certain giant red government. Um,
He was not.
he was the
Here's
first. He was the first president to recognize the USSR as a legitimate state. I'm sorry, he could have just
And
here's
kept
the
only
status
thing.
quo.
10% of the world's
Here's
land
the
map. Are
thing.
you just supposed to
Here's the
ignore it?
thing.
Yes.
Gentlemen. Here's the thing. We are talking, in my opinion, when it comes to relating to monarchism, I think World War II is overrated. I think that the more important thing to realize is that the Great War, the war to end all wars, America was on the wrong side of that.
World War One. Oh
eh,
yeah, we were totally on the wrong side of World War One.
We could have
Y-
cleansed Canada.
World War One was, in my opinion, a war of monarchies versus democracies. And while there are some exemptions to that, especially Great Britain, I think it still holds true in a general sense. It
World
was
War One, in my opinion, was a mistake. I don't care about the sides.
Here's the
It
thing.
never
I think
happened.
the only person who should have been blamed for what happened is Gavrilo Princip.
Yes.
And and wonderfully, blessed Karl made sure that he rotted and died in an Austrian prison. So he got his due.
Did he live long enough to basically see the world go
I
to
think he died like a year before the war ended, or 2 years.
It
Died
was
in like
I think it was
1916 or 17.
let
some
me look up
yeah,
lem-
because part of me wants to think that he didn't live long in prison because if he was mistreated.
I think he was executed actually.
Yeah,
Cuz
it was either he
look,
was executed or he just died in prison. I don't
he
remember
So
which.
in
died
my opinion, he should have lived long enough to see all the suffering he caused.
I mean, he did. He got to see through like he got to see like the worst parts of the war.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for the guy, but part of me thinks that if he lived through it, he might have saw it as worth it because
Okay.
at the end he did get
So
Yeah.
Yugoslavia.
here's what I see. So okay, here's the pay. So this is Wikipedia. So take this as you will. Um, from February to June 1916, Princip met with Martin Pappenheim, a psychiatrist for the Austro-Hungarian army. 4 times. Pappenheim wrote that Princip asserted that the First World War would have occurred even if the assassination had not taken place. I kind of agree with that, but I think Princip he was the catalyst.
Okay.
And hold
Well,
on, and uh, and that he cannot feel himself responsible for the catastrophe. He died 28th April 1918, 3 years and 10 months after the assassination. At the time of his death, weakened by malnutrition and disease, he weighed about 88 pounds.
hmm. Well, he's not
Bruh.
wrong that World War One. Like, hey, I'm gonna say he is right and wrong. There was going to be a war on Europe in,
Oh,
like,
no,
that
definitely.
decade.
20 years before the
Like,
war, it was predicted by Otto von Bismarck. Like, the war was
yeah,
going to happen.
but like whether it would have exploded into the scale that World War One exploded into,
I
that's
think, and that's what I was
debatable.
saying. That's what I was saying with Princip, because I think what would have happened if Princip had not assassinated Franz Ferdinand, what I think would have happened is that the different separate conflicts that had culminated together to cause the First World War, I think they would have been solved separately. They would not have
Like,
all
they
been
would have been
solved at
their own
once.
separate wars.
I think there would have been a Balkan War. There would have been
There,
some war, either in Africa or something.
yeah, there would have
There
been.
would have been something in Western Europe, like a repeat of the 30 Years' War. Like, but there would have been
No,
something. Well,
because
I mean,
the
just
way
like
I see
like
it,
in this.
okay,
I'm
go ahead.
just talking in the when I say repeat, I'm not saying like a full same side, same idea. Like I'm just saying like it would have been similar in that it would just be kind of a general big war in Western Europe is what I mean. But I don't think it would have been as big as World War One. I also think that technology is partly to blame for the First World War's just general horribleness. If we had advanced way too quickly than we were ready for, and
19th century tactics and like strategies combined with like modern weapons of war.
and our eagerness to take newly developed ideas and turn it into weapons of war. I think there was a famous chemical that was developed by some German scientist who
Uh,
then went on to develop chlorine gas, which was the undetectable and far harsher version of mustard gas.
That
I
would be
think
Fritz
you're
Harbor
confusing that
and
story with like Herman
Fritz
Bosch,
Harbor.
who like invented some
That
fertilizer
was
thing, and that would become Cyclone
Nitrogen.
B.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
Fritz Harbor, and Fritz Harbor did end up inventing Zyklon B, or as he called it at the time, Zyklon A, and that was for pesticides.
quote to or quote. Jeez. Thank you to Basil, who might be joining us in the future, for that information. But yeah, no, I think that the technological advancement that we had in the first, like around that time, was too quick for the war. Like we should not have been developing that fast and then immediately turning it to conflict. It was disastrous, and I think it led to an idea that there needs to always be an arms race for like you always have to have better weapons because reliably you could have a fair difference in your weapons before the First World War, and but after that it always just had to be you have to have the best weapons, and that resulted in the A bomb. So I am of the staunch opinion that the First World War was a product of and a causation and then of technological advancement. It was caused by and then accelerated it, and I think that it's just been detrimental with the amount of destruction it's caused.
Oh, another stupid thing Hitler did. Thank you for mentioning the A bomb. Adolf Hitler intentionally stunted Germany's atomic program out of anti Semitism.
Standard.
Like,
I
he
mean,
literally claimed that the atomic bomb and atomic physics was Jewish science and was inferior.
I mean,
And
Meanwhile,
that's
all the
why
then
Israel is
Jews.
again,
portrayed as a cube.
then
Meanwhile,
again,
thousands upon thousands of Jewish nuclear physicists crossed the Atlantic, and guess what they ended up
I was
working
about to
on?
say you have people like Oppenheimer and Einstein working on the nuclear program in America.
I mean,
Uh,
then again, weren't
To
there
paraphrase Solomon the
there was an entire
Magnificent,
operation to stunt the Germans' operations in Norway with heavy water because they were going to make a nuke.
and the funny part is when we finally found their lab when we entered Germany, the heavy water wasn't even working. They couldn't get they couldn't even
There
create a
wasn't even
sustained chain
any. There was a
reaction.
whole sabotage mission to make sure it didn't get back to Germany.
Right, but when they found their lab, they had set up a small reactor to try and get it to work, and they couldn't get it to work. They couldn't figure out how to get a sustained chain reaction. Where we figured that out back in like 42, 41, somewhere in there.
well, and then we screwed up and we had some guy who was holding open a plutonium core with a screwdriver.
Well, the whole Devil's Core thing was like a mix of just ego and
Yeah, that dude was a
just like
moron.
yeah, it was just ego from the part of the scientists.
Also, I will say, just another rant about this. Don't forget that for the necessary materials for nuclear bombs, there was needed fluoride. And so the US contracted chemical companies, to make fluoride, which started poisoning people, and people started suing. And so, for the US government to continue its nuclear program in secret, they started saying that fluoride was good for you, and people started putting it in your water.
I
And
mean,
that
it is
is,
good for your teeth, provably.
yes, but it's not good for your insides. Like fluoride things that you put in your mouth that are like sold by companies, you're told to spit out.
Right. But what do they need fluoride for the nuclear program?
It's for
To
the
make it all shiny.
refine. Well, no, I think it's for the refinement of plutonium, if I'm not incorrect. Though I'm sure someone's going to tell me I'm wrong.
I
That's
mean,
mostly what the comments are for.
if I remember correctly, the way plutonium is made is they put it in the breeder reactor, and what happens is the heavier, more stable uranium atoms absorb the neutron flux, and that turns them into plutonium. I'm not a
Mm,
nuclear physicist to explain it, but
what
Nuclear physics is too much for my tiny brain
I
to
understand
comprehend.
I understand nuclear energy fairly well, which, by the way, nuclear energy is superior to all other forms of energy. Um,
making
because go ahead.
sorry, go ahead and finish.
No. After you.
Making heavier elements is a lot more complicated than breaking them down.
Yeah, but breaking them can be safe if you don't have dumb reactors that you don't want to change because you're too good for it.
Uh,
Soviet Union.
I love the fact that 90% of the reason why the Soviet nuclear program was so sketchy is because they stole it from the US and then tossed out all the safety paperwork to save time and money.
Safe
That's
things we
literally
don't
what.
need.
Oh,
It reminds me of it reminds me of that meme where it's like the dude's looking at Chernobyl and like the TV series, and it's like the actual message of it, communists are too dumb to boil water, goes over his head. Well, nuclear
Slobs are
energy
too
is
boiled.
dangerous. Well,
I have
nuclear energy is
another
bad.
one. I have another meme from that TV series. It shows the guy who played the scientist and the politician. I forget the characters' names right now.
Boris and Vasily, I believe, but someone's
Yeah,
gonna tell.
Boris and Vasily. It's the scene where they're dropping the stuff into the reactor, the sand
Boron,
boron, to
boron
trigger the
sand.
reaction. And the captain said any machine is a smoke machine if you operate it wrong enough.
Oh, that reminds me of the greatest joke from that TV show. And Charles, have you watched Chernobyl?
I highly suggest it
No.
if you haven't.
I mean,
What
it's
I
on
don't
my.
what
have Apple
I guess it's on
TV.
my bucket list, but
what
no,
all
no.
right. What costs $10,000, produces loads of smoke daily, weighs easily 10 tons, and cuts an apple into 5 pieces?
Hmm. This is a
A
riddle. Hold on.
Soviet
Repeat
machine
again.
that
Hold on.
slice
Hold on.
apples into 4 pieces!
That is the correct answer. A Soviet machine designed to cut apples into 4 pieces.
Oh, did you know that Chernobyl wasn't Russia's first great nuclear accident?
Wasn't it Leningrad?
No, Mayak. Have you ever heard of Mayak?
Yes, I have. I couldn't remember the name though. I thought it was Leningrad.
But basically, for those of you who don't know, Mayak was, if not one of the first facilities where Russia built so they could synthesize plutonium.
But it brings us to the most important point of that show, which is communists can't boil water. Greatest lesson that show ever gave us.
It is
We
true, though.
break down atoms to boil water to turn wheel, so somewhere else we can boil some water.
For real.
The Soviets were just incapable of everything except designing a good rifle. That they did very well.
Which
Anyways, how do we
which
get
is
But
to
why
this from talking about like the relationship between the autonomy of different titles? How do we get to this point?
Well,
it's
continue.
all
Because I had ended the topic, and then I asked if there were any major holidays coming up, expecting
World War II.
something
Yes.
else to
Thank
be.
you, Victor. We remember. Yeah. No. This is. I'm pretty sure. Honestly, despite how much we rip on the Soviet nuclear program, it I think that not Soviet nuclear energy is overlooked and treated badly just because of a very few incidences. Like nuclear energy is way superior than boiling dinosaur bones. You know.
For real.
So let's see. Is there anything else that's important coming up this week?
I don't
No,
Uh,
think so.
I mean, I think isn't White Rose Day the 14th? Oh, it's the 10th. Oh,
I don't remember.
I suppose that that
I
White Rose
don't know
Day.
what that is.
It's the birth of our beloved James the Third.
Yeah, I know that, Basil. Basil just pointed out to me, thorium is incredibly safe and ensures that nuclear disasters don't happen.
right?
Uh,
And the
That's
only
exactly what Thor would want you to believe.
and you
thori,
know the thing that makes me mad about thorium is we knew how to use it. We knew it was safer. We knew it was more advantageous. But because we can't
uh,
make nuclear weapons with it easily, we never developed the technology to use it.
Yeah.
that was on my point of we were developing too fast. Oh, I am vindicated. Anyway, I
Anyway,
think
let's
that's all on that topic.
yeah. Anyway, back to. Could you go over it again because we was sort of a little bit interrupted by that point. And thank you for that point, by the way, Trad. Charles, did you want to save it again?
White Rose Day. It's the birthday of His Majesty King James the Third, the first, the old pretender, as he is known among certain cringe folk. Um, Come, let us drink a health, boys, a health unto our king. Let's drink no more by stealth, boys. Come, let our glasses ring. For England must surrender to him they call pretender. God save the face defender and our true lawful king. Anyways,
I'm not gonna say it.
He's still
I'm
lost.
not gonna say it. But
Bingo.
Highlanders are very weird people, and you
they
should
kind of
not
are, though.
associate with them.
Well, come, rise, rise, lowland and highland men, bold sire, fearless son, each coming early. Rise, rise, mainland and island men, belt on your broadswords, fight for Prince Charlie. That's another song I can rip.
How
He's
about
still lost.
this is gonna turn?
Yeah, so we've lost 4 uprisings, fifth time lucky, as they say. I'm sure that's a common phrase, right?
No.
No?
Fifth
I
time's
was,
a charm.
I was about to,
Anyways,
I was about to
and you
say
know
that
what?
Carlos
To
can say
quote
the
to
same.
quote some stupid little
Yep.
Jacobite song, "Stinky, stinky German prince, bad, not king of England.
And the
Your
I
funny
did
pretender
part
trees
is
come
a
up
is,
among
German
our hill and
prince."
hills, that wee bit German laity. You bit fit the phone and trash and doubled it in our yiddy. Actually, I got that
and the
wrong, but
funny part
Your
is, the
pretender
current
is
heir
now
to
a
the
German
line of
prince.
Stewart is a
Ironic.
German anyway. So
For
well,
real.
here's the thing though.
Oh,
Like Charles or Franz Duke of Bavaria, Francis II, is actually directly descended from James no, Charles the First. Well, I mean, whereas whereas Charles III only goes back to James the First. So like based on that alone, he's more British than Charles. So I'm just saying.
No, because you go down into like something. The family at that some point
Anyway,
it doesn't matter if by seniority
I
because you lose the culture.
Yeah, I totally forgot, by the way. There is a tiny bit of MOA-related news that I did want to speak on for 2 seconds, basically. Finally, some members were able to watch the BBC documentary Europe's Royals Revealed. And when they get to our interview, they begin by saying, some may call them punk conservatives or MAGA monarchists. Interesting titles. Personally, the only one I think is actually a fun one is punk conservatives, and I'd actually accept that title because it's just kind of funny. But what do you guys think about those?
When I heard MAGA monarchist, I was like, "Oh, great! This is only Illuminati in it now."
Yeah, but it's alliteration.
I'm half waiting for a bunch of people to swarm me on Twitter and just be like, Trump lost," and I have to sit there and say, "Yes, don't care, didn't ask."
But it just reminds us that our ideology head Ulysses has very good one-liners.
Yes, I believe his best one-liner, if I remember, was, "The people want a king, they just don't know it yet."
They want to be ruled, were his exact words, and truly reminds us that there's a good reason he's our ideology head.
He
Anyway.
doesn't speak often, but when he does, he always spits facts.
Well, that's because he like disappears for a month and then decides to post banger memes.
Not even allowed to post his most banger memes on the server because it breaks rules.
That's true. If you want to come see some of Ulysses' best memes, you can join our Discord. Link in the description below. I'm kidding. I won't steal Charles's bit.
Well,
he's already stolen it. So.
Yeah, you
Can't
kind of
tell
well.
the difference, anyways.
Okay. Yeah, one of these
if someone
days,
was going to
Charles
steal it, it might as well be you.
I was about to say, one of these days, he's going to give me the script and I'm going to start reading it. Like halfway through, someone's going to realize it's not him.
Bold of you to assume that there's a script.
Speaking of scripts, how about you actually take us home?
All right, I am man of people. That's his lie. I am not man of people. I am man
of censorship regime.
Well, yes. I was thinking about saying man of God, but I'm way too sinful for that, unfortunately. I don't know. Maybe if I actually do something worthy of canonization.
You're more pious than anyone in this podcast right now. Don't sell yourself short. You're just pious to the point where it gets annoying for other people.
Will is right. Anyway.
Okay, well. No cookies. 4 removes today, unfortunately. But if
all due to Krieger.
No, Will got a couple, I think. But if you would like to join us live for Monarchist Minute, then you can mosey on down to their description and click the link in the description below. I've ruined my own bit. I'm telling you, there's not a script.
I think you're confused by the accents you're trying to do all at once. Anyway, finish it. Come on.
Comrades, I am not confusable. I am not censorable because there is nothing for me to censor. If you would like to see our Twitter, then you can find the link to, then you can, okay, then you can follow us on Twitter, link
at the description below.
If you would like to know why I do this, then you can probably find our email address by going to our website, link
in the description below.
No promises on me answering that question, by the way, because I don't know myself.
Most likely gonna be me answering on his behalf.
Probably, but if you would like to exercise your what's the finger next to the thumb? Pointer? Yeah,
Your
the pointer.
index.
The pointer.
Index.
The index.
So it's the
Okay.
pointer.
If you would like to exercise your index finger, then you can check out all the other cool stuff we have in the links in the
In the
description
description
below.
below.
And now that I have completely butchered this, it didn't happen, but I deserved it. Will,
Sorry, I was
Uh,
putting up
Deafening
enough over.
silence.
what?
All right. Ah, crap.
All
right.
right, so
Sorry about that, y'all.
perhaps I should take.
he's back. Are you
I'm
back, Will?
back.
He's back.
Sorry, I was putting up dishes.
See, we can have worse endings, Charles.
In the name of the
They can-
Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Most Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Have mercy on us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. All right. Until next week, may God bless you, and may God save the United States of America.